Bully picks on black girl. Her army sniper dad makes a shocking entrance. She thought her biggest challenge would be keeping her grades up. But from the moment she stepped inside Westfield Academy, she realized the battle was just beginning. Aaliyah. Carter had always been top of her class. Books were her comfort. Numbers made sense when the world didn't. And she believed that if you worked hard enough, you could go anywhere. That's what she told herself the day she received the scholarship to Westfield Academy, one of the most elite private schools in the state. Her mom cried when she got the letter. Not from sadness, but pride. They didn't have much, just a small 2-bedroom apartment above a Chinese restaurant, but her mom had always given her everything she could. This scholarship felt like a way out, a future, a shot at Harvard, maybe even NASA, like she'd dreamed since she was little. The first day at Westfield, Aaliyah woke up extra early. She pressed her uniform flat, tied her curls back neatly, and stared at herself in the mirror. She wanted to fit in, but she also didn't want to disappear. Around her neck, she wore her grandmother's silver locket for luck. The one woman in her family who never backed down from anything. But from the moment she stepped through the tall iron gates, Aaliyah knew this wasn't going to be easy. The buildings were beautiful. Ivy-covered walls, marble steps, tall windows that let sunlight pour in like a movie. But the stares from the students weren't warm. Some were curious, others were dismissive. A few looked her up and down like she didn't belong. She kept her chin up. Just nerves, she thought. They don't know me yet. In her first class, AP English, Aaliyah tried to shake it off. The teacher was talking about Toni Morrison's Beloved, a book Aaliyah had already read twice. When she raised her hand to share her thoughts, the room went quiet. Her voice was calm, her words thoughtful. The teacher nodded, impressed. But behind her, a voice whispered, "Affirmative action must be working overtime." She didn't turn around, didn't flinch, just swallowed the lump in her throat and kept writing. That voice belonged to Logan Hastings. Golden hair, expensive, shoes, and the kind of arrogance that came from knowing his dad was the town's mayor and owned half the school board. He bumped into her by accident after class, knocking her books out of her hands. "Oops," he said, smirking. "Didn't see you there." Everyone laughed. Even the teacher looked the other way. It would have been easier to cry, to say something. But Aaliyah just picked up her books, stood up straight, and met his eyes with a calm, quiet look that said, "I'm not going anywhere." Later that day, she sat alone in the cafeteria until a cheerful girl sat across from her. Zoe, with a bright smile and a lunch packed from home. "You're Aaliyah, right? The scholarship student?" Aaliyah hesitated. "Yeah, I'm Zoe. Don't worry, everyone's already talking about how you made Logan look dumb in English. Class, I like you already." They laughed, and for the first time that day, Aaliyah felt a little less alone. But Zoe didn't sugarcoat anything either. She pointed out the group Logan always sat with, Brock, Ethan, and Trey. Their families ran the town. Real estate, law, the court. "You cross them," Zoe said, "and things tend to disappear." Aaliyah didn't say much, just nodded and stored that info deep in her mind like a chess move waiting to happen. That night at home, her mom asked how the first day went. "It was fine," Aaliyah said. She didn't want to worry her, but later, alone in her room, she stared at the only photo she had of her father. Faded, distant, a soldier whose face she could barely remember. All she'd ever been told was that he was a Green Beret. Killed on a mission when she was 7, she touched the edge of the picture frame, eyes burning. "I wish you were here," she whispered. But she had no idea how close her father actually was, or that the quiet battle she had started that day would soon pull him out of the shadows. And that's where the storm truly begins. Aaliyah woke up the next morning hoping yesterday had just been nerves. Maybe people would give her a real chance. Today. Maybe Logan would forget about her. Maybe it would get easier. But Westfield Academy wasn't built to make things easy for girls like her. In second period, she arrived early and took the only open seat near the front. Logan and his crew walked in moments later. They didn't say anything at first, just sat behind her and whispered loud enough for her to hear. Didn't know they let in charity cases this year. I heard she came from the projects. She's probably only here to boost diversity stats. The teacher walked in. No one said a word, and no one did a thing. She focused on the lesson, took notes, kept her eyes on the board. But inside, her hands were cold and her jaw was tight. At lunch, she found Zoe again. Same smile, same energy. They started already, didn't they? Zoe said, peeling an orange. Logan has a pattern. First, the whispers, then the accidents. Then they make it so miserable that people just leave. Has no one ever stood up to them? Aaliyah asked, her voice low. Zoe glanced across the cafeteria. Some tried. Most either backed down or their parents pulled them out. You'd be surprised how fast a scholarship can vanish when the right phone calls get made. That afternoon, Aaliyah's science project was accidentally knocked off the counter, shattered. Logan apologized sarcastically and walked off. The teacher sighed, offered her paper towels, but no extension. In history class, she raised her hand to correct a misquote on a slide. Logan whispered to Trey, "She thinks she's smarter than everyone." Classic. The teacher ignored it. By the end of the week, her locker was defaced. On the inside door, just beneath the shelf, someone had carefully hidden stickers with racist slurs, just subtle enough that only she would notice. Rage bloomed in her chest. She peeled them off with shaking hands and walked straight to the vice principal, but he didn't even look at the photos she showed him. "These are serious accusations," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Are you sure you're not misinterpreting something? Sometimes teenagers joke in ways that get misunderstood." "It's not a joke," she replied, firm but calm. "This was planned, and I want to file a report." He gave a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll look into it, but without witnesses or camera footage, there's not much we can do." Aaliyah left the office feeling smaller than she'd ever felt. Not because of what had been said, but because of what hadn't. Back home, her mom asked how school was, again. Aaliyah just smiled and said, "Busy." But that night, she couldn't sleep. She opened her journal and listed every incident, the comments, the vandalism, the sabotage. She dated everything, screenshot messages, took pictures, created folders on her laptop. If no one would protect her, she'd protect herself, with proof. The next week brought a small surprise. In the library, a boy she'd seen before but never spoken to sat next to her. "I saw what happened in Chem," he said, opening a laptop. "You should have been allowed to redo that project." Aaliyah blinked. "Sorry, what's your name?" "Dexter. My dad teaches physics at the community college." She smiled faintly. "Thanks, but people don't usually speak up around here." "I like data," he said. Logan's behavior follows a consistent pattern. He tests boundaries, then escalates, until someone stops him. Despite his odd clinical tone, there was a quiet kindness in Dexter's voice. Over the next few days, he became an unlikely ally. When teachers partnered them for a physics assignment, their styles clashed at first. She was hands-on, he was theoretical, but it worked, better than either expected. "You're different," he told her one afternoon as they left the library. "Most people give up by now." "I don't have that luxury," she said. "This place is my only way forward." What neither of them knew yet was that Logan wasn't done. In fact, he was just getting started. One night, Aaliyah opened her phone to find a fake profile in her name. Dozens of edited photos, lies, inappropriate messages, rude, disgusting captions. and a flood of comments from anonymous accounts, most using language that felt all too familiar. When she brought it to the school counselor, the woman smiled politely. "Teenagers can be cruel, but maybe you need to be more mindful about what you post. These things can hurt college admissions." "I didn't post any of it," Aaliyah said, holding back tears. "This is fake. Someone made it up." "Well, proving that might be difficult," the counselor replied, scribbling something in a file. "Just be careful next time." There it was again. That same wall, that same smile, and no one on her side. That night, for the first time since arriving, at Westfield, Aaliyah let herself cry. Alone in her room, the photo of her father still propped on her shelf. She clutched the locket around her neck and whispered, "What would you do if you were here?" But what she didn't know was that the answer was already on its way. Aaliyah didn't cry much growing up. She had to be strong for her mom, had to be focused, driven, calm, even when things around her weren't. But that night, sitting on the floor of her bedroom, staring at a phone full of hate and lies, something inside her cracked. She didn't cry because she was scared. She cried because she was angry. Angry that someone could do this and still walk through school smiling like they owned it. Angry that the adults meant to protect her only offered polite smiles and empty excuses. Angry that no one seemed surprised this was happening, just unwilling to deal with it. She felt tired in her bones, but she wasn't done. The next morning, she got up, got dressed, and went to school like she always did. Her shoulders were a little straighter, her jaw a little tighter. Something had changed. That day, the whispers got louder. Students scrolled through Logan's latest upload, a video clip of Aaliyah edited to make her look like she was flirting with a teacher. The caption, "Guess grades come easy when you smile like that." Even some of the students she didn't think would laughed. She walked past them all, straight to her locker, and opened it, only to find someone had spray-painted a slur on the inside. And tucked neatly between her textbooks was a rat, dead, bloody, stuffed into a Ziploc bag. She didn't scream, she didn't flinch. She just stared at it for a long moment, then slowly, quietly, pulled out her phone and took a picture. Then she closed the locker, turned around, and walked to the office. Vice Principal Warner barely looked up when she walked in. "Back again?" he said. She placed the phone on his desk. "They put a dead rat in my locker." He blinked once, then leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "You don't have any witnesses, do you?" "No," she said, her voice flat. "No camera footage?" "Probably not. There never is." He folded his hands. "Well, unless we have something concrete, do you know how many times I've reported things?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. Aaliyah nodded once. "Right." That afternoon, she walked home. Her bike tires had been slashed. She wasn't even surprised. A black SUV followed her for 2 blocks, headlights off. Then it turned away. When she reached her apartment, her mom was already home, still in her nurse scrubs, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and lavender oil. The moment she saw her daughter's face, she knew. What happened? Aaliyah sat down at the kitchen table and told her everything. Not just the rat, not just the profile. Everything, from the first day until now. Her mother listened without interrupting. Her eyes grew darker with every word. When Aaliyah finished, there was a long silence. Then her mom stood. She walked to the tiny hallway closet and pulled out her best suit, the one she only wore for interviews and court hearings. "Where are you going?" Aaliyah asked. "To the school," her mother said quietly. "Stay here." Later that evening, she came back with shaking hands and a fire in her voice. They dismissed it. Said you're not adjusting well to the culture of Westfield. "Culture?" she scoffed. "That's what they're calling it?" She sat down heavily. "It's like they want to push you out. Quietly. so they can say it was your choice. Aaliyah sat across from her, her fingers curling tightly into her sweatshirt. I could go back to Roosevelt, she said. At least there, I didn't feel like I was walking through enemy territory every day. Her mom looked at her for a long time. Is that what you want? No. Then we don't run. But what else can we do? Aaliyah whispered. No one believes us. Everyone's protecting him. We're outnumbered. Her mother leaned in. Maybe, but we're not outmatched. That night, after her mom had gone to bed, Aaliyah stared at the photo of her father on her shelf again. She always wondered what he was like. All she knew was that he had served in some elite unit. Green Beret. Disappeared when she was 7. She was told he died. Missing in action. That was the official story. But her uncle, her mom's brother, had once slipped up during a family barbecue. Said something about him still being out there and needing to stay hidden. Aaliyah had never pushed it. But now? She opened her phone and scrolled down to a number she was never supposed to use. Her mother had told her to forget it existed, that calling it would only bring trouble. Her thumb hovered over it. Then, with her heart pounding, she tapped the screen. It rang twice before cutting to static. Then a voice, low, calm, and unfamiliar. Authentication, it said. Aaliyah took a deep breath and whispered the code her uncle had given her. Then, after a pause, she said, Dad, it's me. I need you. There was silence. She thought the call had dropped. Then a voice, gravelly and slow. Stay where you are. 3 days passed. No word. No sign. Aaliyah started to think maybe she imagined it. Until, early one morning, while heading to school, she saw a man standing across the street, hands in his pockets, hat low over his eyes. He didn't wave, he didn't speak, but she knew he was watching, and he had come. The man across the street didn't move. He just stood there, still as a statue, his coat buttoned, a small duffel bag at his feet. He didn't carry a sign or call her name. But Aaliyah knew. It was something in the way he scanned the street. Not nervously, but like someone checking for exits, obstacles, and escape routes. His head didn't turn quickly. Just slow, careful movements. Calm, but alert. It wasn't just a man standing there, it was a presence. Aaliyah paused at the corner, her breath caught in her throat. Her mind spun. This couldn't be real. She'd only heard whispers about her father growing up. A soldier, special forces, gone on a mission, never came back. The adults called it service. The kids at school called it abandonment. She just called it confusion. But now, he was here, alive, real. She didn't wave. He didn't nod. But when she looked into his face, partly shadowed beneath his hat, she felt something deep in her chest. Like recognition without memory. That night, she told her mom, and her mother froze. She didn't yell, didn't cry. She just stood there with her hand on the fridge handle, eyes fixed on nothing. Where did you see him? She asked, voice low. Outside school, Aaliyah said. He didn't say anything. He just watched. Her mom took a deep breath. Then he's back. She didn't say your father. She didn't even say his name. He shouldn't be here, she whispered. Then why is he? Aaliyah asked. Her mother didn't answer. The next day, the doorbell rang just after sunset. No knock, just one ring. Monica Carter opened it, and there he was, the ghost they thought they buried years ago. Caleb, older, leaner, a few streaks of gray at the temples, a beard that made him look even more weathered. But those eyes, they hadn't aged. Sharp, calculating, unblinking. Neither of them spoke at first. Then she stepped aside, just far enough to let him in. He walked in like he remembered the place, even though it had changed since he last stood there. In the living room, Aaliyah sat on the edge of the couch, frozen in place. She didn't know whether to stand, hug him, yell, cry, or just stare. She chose the safest option: silence. He looked at her for a long moment, not inspecting, not judging, just taking her in. "You have your grandmother's eyes," he said quietly. "That's all." Then he slowly extended a hand, not for a hug, not to close the years between them, but like someone offering peace. On a battlefield, Aaliyah hesitated, then reached out and shook it. His grip was strong, but gentle. "I'm sorry I wasn't here," he said. She didn't answer, but she didn't let go right away either. That night, after a quiet dinner and a lot of awkward silence, Caleb finally spoke again. This time while looking over the folder Aaliyah had created. Screenshots, photos, dates, times. "You did good," he said, flipping through it with trained eyes. "You collected real intel, tracked the pattern, and you stayed calm." "I did what I had to," she said. Caleb nodded. "That's what soldiers say." "I'm not a soldier." He looked at her then. "You're becoming one." Aaliyah didn't know if that was a compliment or a warning. Later that evening, he walked through the apartment like he was measuring it with his body. He checked windows, doors, angles. Then he walked to the back and stood in front of the photo on her shelf, the one she'd always stared at, trying to guess who he was. He picked it up, held it for a moment, then set it back down. "You kept it," he said. "I had questions," she replied. "I'll answer them. In time." The next morning, something changed. Aaliyah walked into school and didn't feel alone. Her father didn't walk in beside her, but he stood outside across the street, leaning against a tree with his arms crossed, watching. And somehow, everyone noticed. Logan passed her in the hallway, but didn't bump into her this time. He looked over her shoulder toward the windows. There was a rumor already. A man in a long coat, ex-military, watching the school. No one could confirm it, but the tension spread like smoke. Principal Calloway saw him too, watched from the office window and reached for the intercom, then paused. Caleb hadn't said a word, hadn't even stepped onto school property, but everyone could feel it. Something had shifted. By the end of the day, Logan's crew was quieter than usual. Trey avoided eye contact. Brock kept glancing over his shoulder. Ethan was unusually silent. That night, Caleb sat at the small kitchen table with Aaliyah's laptop open. He had drawn up a diagram of Westfield's power structure. The school, the mayor's office, the police, the court. He connected lines like a general planning a quiet war. "They're all tied together," he said. "That's why it's been so hard for you to make them listen. The system is rigged to protect itself." "So what do we do?" Aaliyah asked. Caleb looked up, his expression calm. "We dismantle it." Her mother watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "You promised you left all this behind," she said. "I did," he said, "until our daughter was targeted." She walked away. But she didn't argue. That night, Aaliyah lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The sound of traffic outside. The soft creak of her father pacing in the living room. Something was coming, not because she wanted it, but because it was already in motion. She wasn't sure if her father had come back as the man he used to be, but one thing was clear: he hadn't come back to run. The morning after Caleb's quiet arrival, the air in the Carter apartment had changed. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even tension. It was something more still, more silent. Like the pause before thunder. Caleb was up before sunrise. He'd already swept the apartment again, checked the locks, repositioned the router, and installed something small and silent in the living room corner. a black disc no bigger than a button. "What is that?" Aaliyah asked, bleary-eyed with her first sip of tea. "Acoustic recorder. Doesn't broadcast. Just stores." "For what?" "In case they come. Here again. We'll want proof." Aaliyah didn't ask how he got it, or when. She didn't need to. He moved with the kind of quiet that didn't ask for permission. He didn't take up space. He blended into it. But every move was intentional, from how he sat at the table to how he drank his coffee. It was like living with a shadow that could think. Monica didn't say much. She avoided long eye contact. She didn't yell. She didn't hug him. But she didn't ask him to leave either. She just said one thing before heading to work. "Don't start something we can't finish." Caleb's answer was short. "I don't start anything. I finish things." That night, Aaliyah sat beside him as he went through her digital folders. "You've been tracking everything," he said, almost impressed. "Screenshots, timestamps, incidents. You even labeled your files." "I had to," she said. "No one believed me without proof." He nodded. "That's how the system's built. It doesn't respond to emotion. It responds to documentation. And fear." She looked at him carefully. "What are we doing here exactly?" "We're going to expose the cracks, then let the pressure do the work." "You're not going to hurt anyone?" Caleb gave her a look that wasn't exactly soft. But it wasn't cold either. "I don't need to." The next day at school, Aaliyah noticed Logan's group wasn't laughing as loudly. They weren't swaggering through the halls like usual. They still threw looks at her, but something was different. Even Principal Calloway seemed tense. He walked, faster, kept his door shut, and he didn't call Aaliyah in for a talk like he usually did after something happened. Word was getting around. A man was seen outside the school again. Same spot. Still not speaking. Still not moving. One of the teachers said quietly in the lounge, "He's not just any vet. I heard he was Black Ops. Something classified." Another replied, "How do you know?" "Because my brother-in-law tried to look him up. Half his records redacted. You don't get that unless you've seen things." Soon, even the students started whispering. "Did you hear? That's her dad. The sniper." "Sniper? Like military?" "They say he's got like 100 confirmed kills. Who even messes with someone like that?" The rumors grew faster than truth could follow. But Aaliyah didn't try to stop them. She just walked through the school a little taller now. Meanwhile, back home, Caleb turned their living room into a quiet war room. He used yarn and paper, and index cards, like he didn't trust anything purely digital. Aaliyah helped him map connections. Who Logan's friends were, who their parents were, what positions they held in the town. Real estate, politics, law enforcement. School board. Caleb called it stacked architecture. "It's not just Logan," he explained. "It's the structure that lets someone like him believe they're untouchable." "And we're going after the whole thing?" she asked. "No," he replied. "We're just going to tip it over and let gravity do the rest." Aaliyah watched her father work for hours, piecing things together like a puzzle only he could see. He made lists of vulnerabilities, financial lawsuits, past complaints, hidden scandals, most of it buried, forgotten, or quietly erased. He wasn't just looking for dirt. He was looking for leverage. That week, someone tried to follow Aaliyah again after school. Same black SUV, but this time it didn't make it far. The car was found the next morning with its tires deflated, not slashed, just loosened at the valves. No damage, no violence, no mess. Just inconvenience. On the windshield, a small note printed in plain font. "We see you too." No one knew who left it. But Logan arrived at school looking jumpy. He barely said a word in class. That same day, all of Aaliyah's grades were suddenly updated. Her fake report of academic dishonesty disappeared from the system, and her science teacher, who had ignored Logan's sabotage before, now smiled kindly and offered her extra credit. Caleb never said a word about it, but that night, while washing dishes, he casually mentioned, "Some systems respond to pressure. Some respond to exposure. Most crumble when they realize they're being watched." Then came the real move. One morning, Caleb walked straight into Principal Calloway's office. No appointment, no announcement. He was inside before the secretary could react. Calloway stood up fast. "Mr. Carter, you can't just—" "I just did," Caleb said quietly, and placed a small black device on the desk. "Is that a signal jammer?" Caleb said. "No recordings, no calls, no panic buttons, just a conversation." Principal Calloway's face paled. "Are you threatening me?" "No," Caleb said, sitting down calmly. "If I were, there'd be no confusion. This is a warning." He laid out copies of files, harassment reports, ignored complaints, staff emails, all carefully dated, all connected. "I know what you've been ignoring. I know who asked you to. And I know what happens next if you don't act." Calloway swallowed hard. "What do you want?" "Nothing. Yet," Caleb said, standing again. "But if my daughter's name appears in one more incident report without investigation, you'll have more than just parents to answer to. You'll have policy, you'll have press, and you'll have precedent." Then he picked up the jammer, left the office, and walked out without another word. That afternoon, for the first time in 2 months, Aaliyah walked through school and no one touched her backpack. No one knocked her books down. No one muttered under their breath. Logan watched her from across the cafeteria, his expression unreadable. And for the first time, Aaliyah realized something. They weren't scared of her father's fists. They were scared of what he represented. The one thing power fears more than resistance: accountability. For the first time since she started at Westfield Academy, Aaliyah went 2 full days without being mocked, tripped, or cornered in the hallway. But peace has a strange way of making people nervous, especially when it shows up in a place built on fear. Logan hadn't said a word to her. He didn't need to. He just watched, silent, still, like a flame that hadn't gone out, just gone quiet. Aaliyah noticed it in the way he lingered near the lockers longer than usual, how he scrolled through his phone with tight jaws and twitching fingers. His usual crew, Brock, Ethan, and Trey, stuck close, but kept their conversations hushed now. No loud laughs, no open bullying, just whispers behind hands. It didn't feel like they were giving up. It felt like they were recalibrating. That Friday afternoon, Zoe didn't show up to lunch. Aaliyah tried calling, texting. No reply. By the time last period ended, her stomach was tight. She checked her phone again. Finally, a message came in from Zoe's number. "Emergency. Meet me at the boathouse now. Can't call. Just come." Short, blunt, off. Something felt wrong. Aaliyah stared at the message. The boathouse was a 10-minute walk off campus near the woods. It was usually empty, mostly forgotten. She and Zoe had gone there once, early on, to get away from stairs. That memory pulled at her now. She quickly texted her dad. Zoe might be in trouble. Got a text. "Going to the boathouse. We'll call if anything weird?" She hesitated, then added, "Don't worry." But Caleb Carter wasn't the kind of man who waited for someone to tell him when to worry. 3 minutes after Aaliyah stepped off campus, Caleb read the message. 2 seconds later, he was on the move. He didn't run. He didn't rush. He moved with purpose, cutting through town with a silence that came from years of practice. As he walked, he tapped once on his earpiece, connected to a discrete motion sensor device he'd planted days earlier near the boathouse after identifying it as an isolation zone during his recon. He checked his backup feed from the trail. Cam nearby. Motion triggered. 5 subjects. Moving fast. His jaw tightened. He had been expecting something like this. What he hadn't expected was how fast Logan would act, or how desperate he'd become. Meanwhile, Aaliyah reached the clearing and saw the boathouse door cracked slightly. The lake sat quiet behind it, a thin mist hanging low over the water. She stepped slowly, cautiously. "Zoe?" she called out. "You okay?" No answer. She stepped inside, and that's when she saw it. A hoodie tossed on the floor, a flashlight, and a phone. Zoe's phone. Screen cracked, sitting on the wooden bench. Then the door slammed shut behind her. She spun around. Logan, blocking the doorway. 3 others, Ethan, Trey, Brock, stepped out of the shadows. Crowbars, a pipe. One with a roll of duct tape in his hand. Panic flared in Aaliyah's chest, but she didn't scream. She remembered her dad's words. If they isolate you, use their overconfidence. Fear makes them sloppy. And never forget, survival is just strategy under pressure. Logan took a step forward. "You made a mistake," he said softly. "You brought a ghost to a chess match." "You lured me here with Zoe's phone?" Aaliyah asked, her voice steady. Logan shrugged. "We figured it was time for a real message." "You could have picked a better place," she said calmly. "Why?" "Because you're not the only one who plans." That's when the lights went out. Every phone flashlight, every screen. Gone. The room plunged into pitch black, and from the far end of the boathouse, a voice spoke. "Took your time, Logan." Suddenly, bodies thudded. A grunt, a crash. The sound of someone hitting the wall hard, then silence, then a flicker of emergency light. Standing in the middle of the boathouse now was Caleb Carter. Still. Calm. Not breathing hard. Logan lay on the ground, gasping, one wrist locked in a pressure hold. Trey stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, unable to speak. Ethan dropped the pipe and raised his hands. Brock was already out cold near the exit. Caleb turned to Aaliyah. "You okay?" She nodded, stunned. Heart racing, breath shaky, but untouched. Logan growled from the ground. "You'll go to jail for this." Caleb looked down at him, voice cold and quiet. Self-defense, surveillance footage, 4 armed minors, 1 girl. He reached into his coat and pulled out a USB stick. All of it's recorded. He turned to Aaliyah. "Time to go." As they walked out, she looked back once at Logan. He wasn't snarling anymore. He was watching, not just with fear, but with hate. And that was the difference. The next morning, the school was buzzing. Whispers again, but different now. Everyone had seen the footage, not the fight, but the aftermath. The boys crying, Logan bleeding from a nose broken during his scuffle with Caleb, the weapons. The fact that they lured her there, and the fact that Aaliyah had walked out without a scratch. By noon, the school tried to spin it, said it was a misunderstanding, said the boys were horsing around, but students weren't buying it anymore. Dexter released a quiet thread of text logs, conversations between the boys, screenshots of them planning something big. One line from Ethan, "He won't see it coming." But he did, and now the whole school knew. Principal Calloway pulled Aaliyah into the office again. "We're considering suspension," he said. "For what?" "For being involved in an off-campus conflict." She didn't blink, just pulled out her phone. "You want to play that game again?" she asked. "Because I've got files, I've got evidence, and I've got witnesses." Calloway leaned back, quiet now. Then he sighed. "You're just like your father." She stood. "No, I'm better." That night, Caleb stood on the rooftop of their building watching the skyline. Aaliyah came up, wrapped in a hoodie. "They're scared of you," she said. He didn't answer right away. "They're scared of what you know, of how calm you are." "That's the job," he said. "What job?" "The one where you learn how to fight wars without ever firing a weapon." She stood next to him, quiet. "He's going to try something worse," she said. "Logan." "I know," he replied. "But he's not the problem." "Then who is?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "The people who raised him to believe the rules don't apply." He looked at her now. "Finally. Logan's just a crack in the glass. We're going after the hand that threw the rock." The calm didn't last long. 2 days after the boathouse incident, Westfield's halls felt heavy. Whispers no longer meant amusement. They meant uncertainty. Teachers avoided eye contact with Aaliyah. Students stepped aside when she walked past. Even Zoe, finally back from a family emergency, was stunned when she heard what had happened. "You could have been," she started. "I wasn't," Aaliyah said simply, "because he was there." But even as Logan and his friends stayed quiet, Aaliyah could feel something tightening around her. Not the usual petty harassment, but something slower, bigger, like a machine preparing to reset itself. And then, it did. 3 officers showed up at their apartment one night. This time, not to investigate a break-in. This time, for Caleb. "You're being placed under arrest for assault of a minor and unlawful restraint," the lead officer said, voice robotic, eyes averted. Caleb didn't flinch. "On whose authority?" The officer hesitated. "Orders from the district attorney's office. Pressure from the mayor. Judge Klein signed the papers this morning." Monica stepped forward. "The mayor's son tried to assault our daughter. We're just following the order, ma'am." Aaliyah watched as her father, who had once trained to disappear behind enemy lines, now stood still in the doorway, allowing the cuffs, saying nothing. But he looked at her. Just once. And in that silent glance, he said everything. "This isn't defeat. This is another move." By morning, the narrative was being rewritten. Local headlines: "Veteran assaults Westfield students in vigilante act." TV anchors echoed the same phrases: "Unstable, dangerous, ex-soldier with classified history." Mayor Hastings gave a press conference standing next to Logan, who wore a soft brace on his wrist and an expression so well practiced, it almost looked genuine. "As a father, I'm heartbroken," Hastings said. "As mayor, I'm calling for accountability." The whole thing felt rehearsed, because it was. But Westfield had changed. People weren't as willing to nod along anymore. By afternoon, students were reposting Aaliyah's video message. In it, she calmly laid out the pattern of abuse, the harassment she'd endured, and the silence of school leaders. "I didn't ask for a fight," she said, eyes steady. "I asked for safety, for fairness, for the truth to matter. My father didn't attack anyone. He stopped something terrible from happening, something no one else was willing to stop." That clip spread. Students started speaking up, one by one, not just about Logan, but about teachers who ignored cries for help, about scholarships revoked without reason, about grades changed under pressure from important families. Zoe spoke up. Dexter posted files. Even Brock, one of Logan's old crew, slipped a USB drive into a journalist's hand before quietly transferring schools. The dam had cracked. Now it broke. Inside the jail, Caleb wasn't panicked. He wasn't rattled. He was ready. Because this exact moment was the one he'd prepared for. Monica delivered a flash drive the night of his arrest. Aaliyah had encrypted the contents. Dexter had scrubbed the metadata. And inside, everything. Financial records, emails, security footage, sealed reports, all showing how Mayor Hastings and his allies had manipulated Westfield's institutions. The school, the police, the courts. Judge Klein had closed cases without cause. Principal Calloway had ignored formal complaints. The police, chief had redirected resources to protect select students. And now, all of it was about to go public. That Friday, while the mayor stood smiling for cameras at a charity event, news vans swarmed City Hall. Headlines changed. Whistleblower website leaks documents tying Westfield officials to harassment. Cover-ups. Military vet arrested, but town's power structure under fire. Reporters finally asked the real questions, and when they did, Mayor Hastings didn't have answers, because everything was connected now. Everything was traceable. He tried to push blame onto his son, but the video clips showed Logan laughing as he planned the boathouse trap. He tried to paint Caleb as a threat, but a Marine general, retired, posted publicly that Caleb Carter was once considered one of the most disciplined operators in modern military history. And then came the final blow, a recording, leaked anonymously. Mayor Hastings, speaking on a phone call, clearly saying, "I don't care what the girl says, shut her down. I want her out of that school by any means necessary." It played on 3 news stations that night. He resigned the next morning. Logan wasn't arrested, not right away. But the court ordered a full investigation. Juvenile records were unsealed. Former students stepped forward. One girl, now in college, gave a tearful interview about how her family had been forced to move after accusing him of assault. Logan's scholarship was revoked. Universities withdrew admission offers. No one spoke his name with admiration anymore. The once unshakable future had collapsed in on itself, and Caleb, released without charge. No apology, no statement. Just a silent walk out of the station and into the morning air. He went home, hugged Monica for the first time in years, and sat at the kitchen table like he never left. "You okay?" Aaliyah asked him. He gave the smallest smile. "I am now." Weeks passed. Principal Calloway resigned. Judge Klein was removed pending ethics review. Westfield appointed an interim board to review its entire disciplinary structure. And Aaliyah? She became the first ever student chair of the new Accountability Council. Every week, she listened as students came forward. Not just to complain, but to change things, to fix things, to be heard. The school that once tried to erase her now had her face printed on a banner in the hallway. Integrity, courage, leadership. But Aaliyah didn't care about the title. What mattered was the silence that used to crush her was gone. People saw her now, not because of who her father was, but because of who she had become. On her last day at Westfield, she walked through the halls alone, touching the edges of lockers like she was saying goodbye. At the front gate, Caleb waited. Same coat, same calm. But this time, he smiled. "You did it," he said. She nodded. "We did it." "No," he said. "You stood up when no one else would. I just showed you what to do when the system won't listen." They stood there for a moment, watching the students pour out of the building behind her. Then he said something that stayed with her forever. "You didn't just survive this place. You changed it. That's something no bullet could ever do." Epilogue. Aaliyah got into her. Dream school. Full scholarship. STEM track. Her name listed under Leadership and Community Impact. Her grandmother's locket still hung around her neck the day she moved into her dorm. Her mother hugged her tight, whispering, "Your story isn't starting here. It's just turning a page." Caleb stayed close, closer than before. Not always present, but never far. He still worked quietly, helping people who needed protection in ways only someone like him could offer. But now, he had a home. And every time he looked at his daughter, he didn't see the girl he'd once left behind. He saw the woman who had pulled him out of the shadows and reminded him why he'd ever fought at all.